Welcome back to the Club Solutions Magazine podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today's guest is Scott Gillespie, a 40-year industry veteran. He owns Saco Sports and Fitness, a multi-generational outcomes-based health club, and an F45 training studio. He has served on the IRSA Board of Directors, COVID highlight teams, founded the Maine Fitness Coalition, and chaired his local Chamber of Commerce board. He currently serves on the Maine Medical Center Board of Directors. Scott's mission is to help the fitness industry support more members in achieving their goals. He consults with independent clubs on improving member outcomes and profitability through programming and sales systems. And he is also a very longtime friend of Club Solutions, and we're grateful for all that he's contributed to not only our publication, but the entire industry over the years. So Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Taylor, for having me. I'm honored to be on your podcast.
Awesome. To dive in today, I want to talk about something that I don't think we talk about enough in the fitness industry, and that is preparing the next generation, preparing who is going to take over for the leaders of this industry. And that is something that you have worked on the past year or two. So I'm really looking forward to getting your perspective on this too. To start, I'd love for you to just kind of share, when did you realize that passing the baton was something that you needed to do operationally? What was the right time? Because when you're in this industry for 40 years, it may feel like there's never a right time. There's always something popping up. So how did you come to the conclusion that this is something you needed to do?
It's a great question. I think the answer is different for everybody. For me, I had planned on sometime in the early 2020s as a time to kind of step down. I never wanted to sell the club. I thoroughly love it. Enjoy the community we've built and how we serve our local community. But the realization came that I was probably not the best person to lead operations in a club. Having done it for 40 years, I think there's a time for the next generation. And although I still love the strategy, I love the innovation, I love guiding, teaching, and developing people, in the day-to-day operations, I really felt the next generation would probably serve our members better. That plan was delayed by COVID. Clearly, when a pandemic comes along or a black swan event, we had a fire 35 years ago, the financial crisis. When those things happen, it is not the right time for a leader to step down. That's the time for a leader to step up. And so we spent those 3-ish years of the pandemic and the rebuilding making sure that we survived. And we got through the playbook that we had to run to get through that tragedy. So we delayed it a little bit, but coming out of the pandemic, I learned a lot of great lessons about my people. Who were the right people? Who could step up when it mattered? Who were the folks who really didn't do what I thought they would or hoped or expected them to do and weren't part of our plans going forward? And in so doing, it gave me a great level of confidence in some of my team members. And so coming out of the pandemic, and roughly 23 to 24, is when I started the leadership development process. So taking people from managing a department to managing bigger operations and becoming aware of the implications of all the facets of the business. And so it took about 1.5 years to develop them to the point where I felt comfortable. And then how do I initiate that plan to the whole team and help people understand that the club can still exist? In fact, it can thrive and hopefully grow without me in the club each day. So it was a wonderful process. There's a lot of steps to it, but that's the overview.
Yeah, I'm sure your team is extremely grateful that you did not hand over the keys and walk away during COVID, that you gave them some time. So it's interesting that you say during that kind of process, you had people that maybe you thought were going to be the leaders that showed true colors, and then ones who stepped up that maybe you didn't expect. Yeah. What did that look like? Why do you think that occurred? Do you think it was the stress of the situation? Or do you think it was just, what was your insight there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think stressful times uncover character, right? When things are comfortable and easy, you get the status quo. And although we always strive for excellence and we're always pushing to be better, in a well-established club that has a good process to develop people, to develop systems, to help members succeed, there can be a certain level of comfort, right? And predictability. And we absolutely value our staff members' lives outside of the club, and we never want to ask them to give up their lives outside the club to sacrifice that for the benefit of the club. It should be a balance. But when things like COVID happen, or the fire, or financial crisis, or major shifts in competitive structure, it really is time for people to step up and maybe give a little bit more than they might because it's needed. And when people choose to stay on unemployment instead of coming back to work because they're making as much on unemployment as they're going to work, it tells me a lot about their character and how much commitment they have to the operation. And for those people who were willing to work very hard through the pandemic to find solutions very quickly, I think to say they enjoyed it would be a stretch, but to say that they relished the challenge would be fairer. And those are the kind of people who I think I want in charge when I'm not there. There are going to be future challenges, hopefully not as bad as the pandemic, but there are going to be. And how do people react to that? And so I believe those challenges uncover character in both directions, positive and negative, and we get to align those character qualities that we think will help our business and our members and our community, keep those people on, reward them, and give them some additional responsibilities if they want it.
Yeah. What other qualities, skills, that kind of vein did you look for in the people that you were ready to pass your operational task on to? Because I know there has to be a level of trust between you and your team, right? You're handing over 40 years of your legacy, honestly. So what did you look for in those people that made you be like, okay, I can do this. I feel good about it?
Yeah, I think it starts with our core values. If you have identified as an organization what you value and what is most important to your culture, because here's the rub, we don't want to change the culture. The culture has worked. We believe it fits with our strategic position. And so how do we uncover cultural values in people? Certainly behavior under stress does that. And for us, the cultural values that are really important are things like, are they glass half full people? Do they find the positive in things, or are they negative and sarcastic? For us, we're looking for glass half full people. We're looking for people who are proactively friendly, not reactively friendly. If someone says hi to me and I'll say hi back and be polite, but the people who initiate conversations and who will engage and develop communities and relationships. And are they supportive of all people, not just the people in their charge, but are they naturally servers, right? Do they default to, I want to make this other person's life better, or I want to help them succeed? To us, those are our three foundational core values, and stress uncovers those. Obviously, we use behavioral interviewing to decide whether or not we believe people have those qualities to begin with. And then there's some aspirational values. Are they humble, ready, willing, and able, in fact, wanting to accept change, right? How can we look to make this place better? Are they energetic? Are they progressive? So those are some aspirational values. The non-negotiable ones, are they trustworthy? Do they have a hard work ethic? Those we find out really easy. But to me, it was a value-based decision. What is their character and their behavioral traits?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that a lot of club owners struggle to let go because especially when they've built the club from the ground up, they feel like they almost are the brand because it's been such an integral part of who they are. How did you personally navigate this shift to stepping back from the day-to-day operations, being in the club all the time, to being more of the steward of the vision?
That's a great question. So I think there's a lot of pieces to that. It starts with my roundtables. When you get to see other organizations, other companies, and how they operate, and how different leaders choose to create systems that make them less important in the business on a day-to-day basis. Can they do it from a distance, or are they supporting and guiding their people? I think being on the IHRSA board of directors was a great contributor to me seeing how some of the larger organizations work. When you've created a brand that is duplicatable, the leader can't be in every club every day. And clearly, whether it's a franchise, and speak to our F45, which also taught me more lessons about how to systemize things and not need to be in there every day. And so one of the challenges was, how do we evolve the brand so it wasn't Scott Gillespie, so it was Saco Sport and Fitness, right? And that was about a 2-year process to give our leaders more of a visible role in the club. Actively didn't go to the club on a decreasing basis over the year and a half before I left. So instead of me being in the club 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week and then being gone one day, 18 months before I left, I was only in the club 30 hours a week, and then 20 hours a week, and then 10 hours a week. And I allowed that transition to happen gradually, which gradually added responsibility to my team members. I could make sure they felt fully supported and could handle it before I gave them more. And it eased them into the process, but I believe it also eased our members into the process of seeing other leaders in the club besides me. So it wasn't a short process, but it was an awareness that I believe if a leader is the only person that can run the organization, it's limiting the organization. And there are so many other people who have ideas, guidance, support, things that they can do to contribute to make it better than the singular leader, especially after 40 years.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you kind of gave your team members time to adjust to more responsibility, building them up, but you also took the members into account and made sure that they're comfortable with who's leading the club too, because you don't want to just put someone else in charge and then all the members be like, who is this guy?
It needs to be comfortable for them as well.
I know one thing I personally learned when I went on maternity leave, which was just being gone for 3 months, not indefinitely, was we didn't have everything in a documented system order. There weren't procedures to everything. Some things you just know in your head and you know how to do them, and it made us realize there's a lot of things that we don't have written down. We don't have standard procedures. How did you go through that process of knowing everything needs to be documented, everything needs to be systematized? Where did you start with that? How did that process work?
It started 20 years ago when I became aware that systems really make the business work. When I wanted to go skiing and play golf and spend time with my family and coaching with my kids, it became apparent that the better my systems were, the less dependent the business became on me. And so instead of being a firefighter, I became a farmer. Can we develop things and kind of plant seeds and allow them to grow and give them the support they need without having to be there to answer every question? So that was one of the easier parts for me in the transition, in that most of our systems, training to manuals, development of staff, accountability for goals, budgeting, how do we handle member issues or complaints, or how is our member feedback system, our sales process, our member journey, all that was well documented before I started this. It did change during the pandemic. It got leaner. In many cases, it had to because of the restrictions that were placed upon us by the governing bodies and by our restriction in capacity. But and to some degree, it actually helped. It helped us clean house in many areas. But most of those systems, Taylor, a great question, were in place before we started this process.
Yeah. I know you talked about earlier that the people you were passing on to surprised you and who you thought. Were there any other surprises in this transition that you didn't really expect, either positively or negatively?
Yeah, I think one of them was, I think I overrated the effect of me leaving. And this is a good ego check. It wasn't that big a deal. When I go back, and I go back every 60 days and spend a couple days with everybody just to help support them and guide them, and I see members, and here's what I hear over and over again. Place is running great, looks wonderful, your new leaders are friendly, they're nice, they're available when I need them, everything seems to be wonderful. And the reinforcement to me was, we had done a good job transitioning, but there comes a time when that one person doesn't necessarily need to be there anymore, right? That the club can run without them. That was a surprise because I did expect some blowback. I expected that there'd be a lot of people who I'd known for 30 or 40 years who would be either disappointed or mad or upset that I wasn't there anymore or letting them down. And that really wasn't the case because they felt supported by the people that replaced me. Interesting question, but no real surprises.
Good. I do think ego is the biggest thing when it comes to change, is we like to think that we may be a little more important than we actually are. We always joke that everyone's replaceable, but I think that speaks to your culture at the club, that you are able to step away, you are able to pour into someone else, and everything does run smoothly, because it's not that the person who is taken over is just that much better than you. It's that you poured into them, you taught them all the strategy, all of the strategic things that you had to do, all the systems in place. You poured into that person. You made sure they were ready and able. You didn't just leave them to the wind and say good luck. So I think that speaks a lot to you as well.
Thanks, Taylor. I appreciate it. It's funny you made that comment that everybody's replaceable. And I can recall using that line in staff meetings over and over again. And I remember following it up with including me. Right?
Yeah.
And I think I used it more in the 5 years previous to leaving it, whether I was subconsciously doing it to set myself up to leave, or whether I was doing it just to make sure that, and it's not that I don't want people to ever to feel uncomfortable or on edge, but I want people to not necessarily get so tied into, they're locked into their jobs and they're safe and they're secure, that they can coast for a little while, that it still is always about growth, and all employees go through phases of engagement. But yeah, you're right. We all are replaceable ultimately.
Yeah. You talked a little bit earlier about how culture is one thing you didn't want to change in the transition. How did you make sure that the culture was reinforced? And I know you're going back and helping and kind of checking things up every now and then, but how do you make sure that culture still stays intact?
So part of it's inspection. Part of it is I have weekly meetings with our team. We have a dashboard so I can see on a daily basis how they're doing on all the measurable items, whether it's MXM consumer engagement scores, whether that's actual sales or leads developed or marketing response or personal training sales or conversion rates or attrition rates. So the numbers speak volumes for how they're doing. And when there's little blips that we get to talk about it, a lot of it was finding the right people with the right value systems we talked about already. But the next is interviewing members when I'm there. And some of them come to me, but I also go to them. And I'll ask 10 or 15 members, how's it going? What do you see? Any changes? And I'll specifically ask them about staff people. And what I'm looking for is helpful, supportive, responsive, friendly, all those qualities that we want people to feel. We long ago tagged the line, we are Maine's most comfortable club. And that stemmed out of many moons ago, Bill Clinton's comments when he was running for president. It's about the economy, stupid, right? That was his kind of thing when he was campaigning. And for us, there was a moment in time 15, 20 years ago where we realized it's about comfort. There's too many competitors out there. They do different things. Some may have more equipment or less, or some may be doing this or that. But ultimately, if we want to serve that person who wants to become fit, it's relatively easy to serve the people who are already fit and just looking for a place to do it, right? It's another thing to serve someone who wants to change their lifestyle and wants to adopt healthy habits. And that's the role we've chosen to play from a positioning perspective. And so when we talk about culture, for us, what that really means is how comfortable can we be to a newbie? How easy is the onboarding process? How successful are we in guiding them into a program so that they have a chance to succeed? We have a belief, and I'm sorry to shock my industry colleagues, that the simple act of joining a health club is not going to help most people get in shape. Access to equipment is not a recipe for success. It certainly is for those who are already fit, but for those who want to become fit, behavior change is not easy. It requires support. And so culture for us is about supporting that healthy habit adoption process. And how good are we at guiding new members into these programs? We have 5 paths that we could put people down, and we track those on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so that, to me, answers the question, how are we doing when I look at our MXM numbers? So a good question. But yeah, there needs to be concrete ways to inspect culture, not just a feeling, because I can't get a feeling from 600 miles away.
Yeah, I think in today's day and age, we're obsessed with data, but I think there's a reason behind that because, like you said, you can't just track a feeling. You need to see that you're actually improving. It's still sustainable. So I like that you have systems in place to be able to track that. But one thing I'm taking away from our conversation, Scott, is even though that you've stepped away operationally, you're still very much involved. So I think that's just something our listeners need to hear. You can step back, but still be engaged in your club, right? You don't have to be running the ship 24/7 to still be a part of your brand and something that you care so much about.
That's a great point. I think part of that concept is moving away was one step in this transition, right? It wasn't the end. Yes, there was a big significant geographic change, but ultimately my job is still to support the team leading the club. And is a year and a half enough time to get them knowing everything they need to know and developing them as much as they can be developed? Absolutely not. People can always develop more, and they can always learn new lessons. And if I just stepped away, although I trust what they do, I don't know that they have all the answers to all the challenges they're going to have. And they want to feel supported and trusted. The military has a great line: train, trust, and verify. Right? And that's in our world, that's the direct, support, inspect, redirect, coach, inspect, and that cycle that never ends. And so to me, it's just an ongoing process. And that's from the business perspective. From my personal perspective, I don't think emotionally or cognitively I can walk away. I love the industry. I love our members. I love our staff. And I feel I would be letting them down if I wasn't sharing some insights, some guidance. And it's not all my ideas or wisdom that comes. In many cases, it's other people we work with or some of the consultants in the industry who do marvelous jobs. Some of the lessons I've learned from previous leaders. I've been doing it 40 years and I'm still learning. So I think it would be naive to believe that my team is 100% prepared the day I leave. So yeah, it's a great point. The growth process never ends, and I want to become a part of that for a while.
Yeah, and I know you kind of had this plan in place for a little bit, and you mentioned that you've had to pivot. But what is maybe one thing you wish you had done earlier in preparing your team to take over operations that you think operators listening today should maybe start on now?
Oh gosh, to me it begins with identifying your core values, right? If you don't know your culture and can't define it and articulate it and then use that knowledge to find the right people, I think that foundationally is a non-negotiable. If you can't do that first, none of this is going to work. Okay, that's first. Second is, once you've done that, what are the levers that you know you need to pull and control on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that make sure that you're on that path of what are your strategic differences and how are you going to succeed in your market? And if you can't systematize those, guide those, and measure those, that I think you're also destined to fail. Those two things are really important. And then lastly, it's, can you start developing people early enough? And I think the answer is no. I did it maybe a year and a half, and should I have been doing it earlier? And maybe I was subconsciously, but I didn't actively think about planning and having sit-down training sessions with them on leadership structure, leadership development, skill sets, expanding their toolbox. It said that if you only have one tool, then and that tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Right? And so most people are, whether they're victims or they're products of the former managers or leaders in their lives, whether that's their parents, their coaches, their teachers, or their bosses. And relative to how good or not good those people were, you're going to start with a belief system of management that may be subpar, substandard. And so we need to develop those as early as possible. And the last piece is, are we finding people who want to develop those pieces, right? It's funny, I have this conversation with many of my colleagues about the next generation of club workers. And what many of us are feeling is that there is a percentage of this new generation who has a very different perception of work ethic than we did growing up. And it's not better or worse, it's just different. And so I'll ask the question to many of my potential hires last 2 years before I was leaving. And one of the questions was, are you looking for part or full-time? Because as our industry has many of both roles. And when they say full-time, I learned to ask the follow-up question, which is, what does that mean to you? And the answer to that question shocked me over time, which was, about 32, 35 hours a week. And yet many of them still wanted full salaries for that. And I commented that would mean that's about 70-ish% of the normal income level. And what are your aspirations after you do this role for X period of time? And they would say, I'd like to do more. And I said, how do you plan to develop those skills? And they really wouldn't have an answer. And so I think finding those people who have the right work ethic, and I hope people don't have to work the 70 or 80 hours many of us entrepreneurs did when we started, but I think it's certainly more than 30 or 40 for those who want to be in leadership in our industry.
Yeah, I love that perspective and I love that insight, because I do think that we talk about leadership development so much in this industry, and staffing and employment. It's like always the number one pain point that I hear operators talk about. And I do think we talk about development to a point of getting staff to your standard of member excellence, right? You want them to be hospitable. You want them to go above and beyond. You want them to smile, do all these things. That's the very basic baseline. I don't think we take it a step deeper and say, how can I train this person to replace me? We don't think that far in advance. And I think that's the fault line that we get into, is we just think the next generation, it's an endless cycle. It was millennials, now it's Gen Z. Everyone's different than me. I like that you said that it's better or worse, it's just different. So learning to adapt as the leader is also important in this transition of whoever is coming in operationally isn't going to do things exactly as you did. But kind of like you alluded to in the beginning, that's probably for the best at some point, because if we're doing something the same way for so long, eventually it's stale. And are we really serving today's generation the best way in the club too, is something to think about.
Yeah, I laugh. You've heard about the 7-year itch in relationships, right? We believe that exists in the relationship between a consumer and the business that serves them, right? We need to do major renovations. And I think in the increasing level of change in our world today, I don't think it's 7 years anymore. I think it's 2 or 3 or 4, and in some cases it's 6 months, right? I'll never forget one early lesson I learned in my career. And I was the general manager of a club and sales manager in Connecticut forever ago. And I was having a conversation with one of our salespeople. And in my mind, everybody wanted to do what I was doing. Why wouldn't they want to? This is my dream. This is what I love. And this is what people should aspire to. And I made the comment, I said, if you ever want to be in my role, then you really need to X, Y, and Z. And I'll never forget his response. He looked at me and says, I don't want your job. You work too hard. You don't have a life. He says, and it was a great eye-opener for me to realize one of our responsibilities of leaders is to understand what are the goals and objectives of the people in our charge, right? And to make the assumption that they all want to lead at a higher level is not fair, because many don't. They don't share that desire, and that's okay. And the sooner we understand what they want and what they value, the better job we can do providing an environment that gives them what they want and us what we want. And many of us have done this. We've changed our structures. How our hierarchy looks different than it used to. A full-time job looks different than it, because I would love a person for 32 hours if they're going to be awesome. I'm only going to pay them for 32 hours, all right? But I would still love them here, and I don't want that to be a deal breaker if they're still going to be a good employee. And at some point in time, we see this with some of this population that they say, you know what? I think I want more now, whether it's more money or more time or more responsibility. But it's a phase that we have to accommodate as long as they can meet our needs. I think we need to accommodate their needs. It's much like the sale of memberships in the industry. When we went to EFT, which I absolutely believe in, and it's a wonderful method of payment, but if that's the only method of payment, now we're forcing a consumer to consume our products in the method which serves us, as opposed to having multiple means of options that we can serve a consumer in the best way that serves them, right? And does our model support that kind of pricing differential? And it's a different conversation, but I think it's a good example of adapting to markets, whether that's your employment market or your consumer market.
Yeah. I think a good thing to remember too is not everyone, kind of like you were saying earlier, not everyone wants to be a leader. And you also need people not to be leaders too. You need someone to just serve their role, and you need those positions always filled. So if someone's comfortable just wanting to be a Group X instructor and they don't want to lead other Group X instructors, that's okay. You need someone to just teach the classes. Yeah, it's just part of the world.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll build on that point, which is it's important in many cases to find someone who doesn't have the ambition for those roles. Because if they have that great ambition, they're going to be out of it in 6 months, and then the member engagement, which has been created, that relationship, is going to go away, and the member's going to have a negative experience, as positive as it was for 6 months. If they move on to something else because they needed more, then we've actually done the members a disservice. We do need to find that person who fits in that slot and can do that for a given period of time, be it a year, 5 years, forever. But yeah, there's a balance, and that's one of the keys to that culture that we talked about, is putting the right people in the right places. I've talked about, do you have the right person in the seats on the bus, right? And understanding people's objectives is an incredibly important part of that process.
Absolutely. Scott, I have a segment for you. It's a little fun that we're adding to the podcast. If you hate it, we can cut it. That's the rules. But
I got to tell you a funny story. So as a climber, I'm on the side of the cliff, and with my partner, and invariably we'd find ourselves in a situation that was less than safe. And we look at each other, and we both knew that trouble might happen right now. And whenever my partner, who is a former firefighter, who looked at stress in a very unique way, whenever he looked at me, he says, "I'm not scared." What he really meant is, we're screwed. Okay? And so when you say this to me, all I can think of is, I'm not scared.
Don't be scared. It'll be fun. It's called Hot Take or Hard Pass. So I'm going to read you statements about our conversation today, and you either are going to say hot take, which means you agree, or hard pass, which you disagree. And you can expand on your opinions if you want. Okay. But it's just a little fun.
Okay, all right.
You can be scared if you want. It's okay. All right. Most gym operators wait too long to start succession planning.
Hard take.
You should be building your replacement from day one.
Hard pass.
All right.
We're going to build a system first.
Promoting from within is always better than hiring leadership externally.
Is there a neutral?
You can be neutral.
I'm going to be neutral on that one, because that's not an absolute. There are times when outside's better, and there are times when inside's better. Yeah.
Okay. If your business can't run without you, it's not a real business.
I'm going to go neutral. It depends on the phase of the business, right?
Okay.
In the early phases as an entrepreneur, it needs you. Later on, yes, it should be able to run without you.
All right.
Yeah.
Standard operating procedures matter more than leadership talent.
Yes.
All
Hard
right.
take.
Hot take, yep.
Hot take.
Letting go of control is the hardest part of passing the baton, not finding the right people.
Hot take.
A successful transition should be invisible to members.
Hot take.
And last one, founders often hold their teams back without realizing it.
Hot take.
Ooh. All right, Scott, what is your hottest take on the industry, if you want to share?
We are moving into an incredibly fast-moving time with AI. And I think we need to embrace it and use it to the best of our abilities. I also believe that if we lose the human touch as a part of our industry, since we are a face-to-face provider of services, I think we are losing something very valuable. The balance that we strike between using technology to serve our members and our teams and our businesses while maintaining the human touch, I think will be the differentiator between those companies that make it long term and those that don't. No AI is not going to work, and too much AI I don't think is going to work either.
Awesome. In my generation, that's usually when people drop the mic when you say things like that. So good job. There you go. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today. I really took a lot away from our conversation. Is there anything you'd like to share that maybe we didn't get to touch on?
No, Taylor, I want to thank Club Solutions for all you do. I think the role that you are playing in our industry is incredibly valuable. So thank you and your team.
Awesome, Scott. Thank you for those kind words.